Welcome to The Issue Is. I'm Elex Michaelson. Former Vice President Mike Pence is potentially interested in becoming future President Mike Pence. This week, we caught up with him in Orange County.
We are delighted to be here. I feel like I've been in this room before.
Former Vice President Mike Pence inside a replica of the White House East Room in Yorba Linda.
I'm Vice President Pence. Nice to be with you.
Pence meeting school kids during a tour of the Nixon Library. Energy, the focus of a conference here. During his tour, Pence checking out Nixon's Oval Office.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
And sitting down for an exclusive one-on-one interview with us. We are joined by the former Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, author of So Help Me God. Congratulations on the book and welcome to The Issue Is.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me on The Issue Is, and it's great to be back in California.
Yeah, and so you're here in California at the Nixon Library. We see a lot of Nixon all around us right now. Yeah. And of course, Nixon, the creator of the EPA back in the 1970s. Right. Energy is what this conference is that you're talking about today. Here in California, the governor has put in place rules to have no gas-powered cars sold in 2035 and on. The Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, who I talked to, said that could potentially be a model for the whole nation. What do you make of that?
Well, first off, let me just say that what our administration was able to do with energy, unleashing American energy and all of the above energy strategy, really powered the economic prosperity of the Trump-Pence years. 7 million good-paying jobs, wages rising at the fastest pace in 50 years, 10 million people moved from welfare to work. And the war on energy that's been waged by the Biden administration and by governors around the country, including Governor Newsom, has put a tremendous hardship on American families. Gasoline prices, while there's been some relief, been through the roof for the last 2 years. That's eaten into family budgets, and I truly do believe, as we'll discuss today here at the Nixon Library, that to revive our economy, we've got to unleash American energy as we did during the Trump-Pence years, and we've got to move away from these government mandates that actually I think will only serve to increase the cost on Americans, whether it be in purchasing cars or gasoline. And at the end of the day, when you think about where most electric batteries are manufactured, these mandates by the Biden administration, and even here in California, about driving Americans toward electric vehicles actually will most benefit China, where most of the batteries for electric cars are manufactured today. So what I believe in is the free market. What I believe is that this nation has been blessed with vast natural resources. We achieved energy independence during the Trump-Pence administration, became a net exporter of energy for the first time in 75 years, and that's the approach we ought to take. Let the market work, let electric vehicles develop, let alternative sources of energy develop. But we ought to have an all-of-the-above strategy. That's what's in the best interest of American families.
But not concerned about climate change?
Well, look, I think the issue of climate change is always a question of balance and who pays. And I think the American people want to follow the science on that issue. We want to make sure that any limitations we place on our economy are also embraced by other countries around the world. But at the end of the day, look, we have the cleanest air, water, and land of any nation on earth. And I think that's a result of a nation that was built on the principles of freedom, of private property, of the rule of law and contract, and that's how we'll achieve a boundless future for America and a clean environment at the same time.
Another big issue is abortion rights. You have been one of the great champions in this entire country when it comes to the pro-life movement because of your administration and the justices that you appointed. Roe v. Wade was overturned. That again is an issue now. Do you think that mifepristone and some of these pills that result in abortions should be illegal around the country?
Well, Alex, I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. I couldn't be more proud to have been a part of the administration that appointed 3 of the justices that sent Roe versus Wade to the ash heap of history and returned the question of abortion to the states and the American people. And I think now we are engaged in a great national debate, not only in Washington, D.C., but all across the country on the subject of the sanctity of life. And I appreciate you acknowledging our role in that. Whatever the future holds for my family, we'll continue to be a voice for the unborn. But also, I want to be a voice of compassion for people that are facing crisis pregnancies. I think it's important as states move pro-life legislation that we're also seeing additional resources for women, not only during pregnancy, but after they bring that child into the world. I want to see adoption reform in the country. I believe there's a whole range of solutions that will bring greater compassion and greater outcomes for life. With regard to the question of mifepristone, the Supreme Court's considering that issue this week, and the reality is that 20 years ago, the FDA exceeded its authority in approving the abortion pill. They actually used statutes that were designed for the emergency approvals. They didn't go through the ordinary processes, and women have paid the price over the last 20 years. I think of 2003, a young woman named Holly Patterson lost her life after taking mifepristone. Her parents didn't even know she was pregnant. She ended up being taken to the hospital. She had become septic. She died. And there's documented cases of hundreds and hundreds of women who've been injured by this pill. And my hope is that the Supreme Court today will rein in the FDA, require the FDA to live under the laws of our country. And at the end of the day, I fully support efforts to take the abortion pill off the market. I think I'm pro-life, but I also believe that it's caused great harm for women around the country.
You're obviously considering whether to run for president or not. You say that you're praying on it. I'm curious, if you do, what do you see as your lane for success? Because obviously some of the folks who like President Trump are frustrated at you over January 6th. President Trump is frustrated at you over January 6th. Some of the folks who don't like President Trump are frustrated that you've supported him as much on pretty much everything else. What's the lane for success?
Well, I think that'd be for others to say if we choose to run. And Elex, I don't have anything to announce today.
You don't?
I will tell you.
Come on, give me something. Yeah.
I'll tell you, even here in California, we've been getting an awful lot of encouragement around the country. And I think it's twofold. Number one is I think people look at the record of the Trump-Pence administration, where we made historic investments in our national defense. We secured our border. We cut taxes, rolled back regulations, unleashed energy, created unprecedented prosperity, and 300 conservatives to our courts at every level to uphold all the God-given liberties enshrined in our Constitution. I think people want to get back to those policies, but I'm always very humbled that people recognize that the approach I've taken to politics, the premium that I've placed on trying to show respect and civility in the public debate could well be an idea whose time has come. Look, I believe that democracy depends on heavy doses of civility. And frankly, on both sides of the aisle, we've gotten away from that in Washington, D.C. And our politics is more divided today than any time in my lifetime, but I'm not convinced the American people are as divided as our politics. And I really do believe the challenge that we face in 2024 is not just to get back to the policies that were working for the American people, but ultimately to have government as good as our people. Government that treats one another the way the American people treat each other just about every day. That could create the conditions where we can take on some of the large, intractable problems that we face, whether it be the crisis at the border, the rise of China, Russian aggression, or the massive debt crisis that's facing our children and grandchildren. It's going to take a style of leadership that at least has the capacity to bring people together, and I'm always humbled when people associate me with that.
And in the book, you write about Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, two of your heroes who were able to do that in sort of a different era in politics, an era that you were a young man in and a part of. Lastly, just to wrap things up, so much has been said about you by people who really don't know you. And I'm curious, what do you think is the biggest misconception about you? What do people get wrong about you?
Well, you know, the American people are entitled to their own opinions, but I'm always very moved. As I've traveled around the country since I left the White House, how many people will come up to me in a diner or on a street corner or after a little event and say, "I didn't know you were like that."
Meaning what?
Well, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it's that I don't, you know, I don't take myself too seriously. I love this country. I love the American people. I've got my own convictions, my own values, but to know the Pence family is to know that we show respect to every American, whatever their politics and whether we agree on every issue. And I'm always very moved when people reflect on that. And if we choose to enter the race for the Republican nomination for president, I would do so recognizing that I'm well known, Alex, but I don't think I'm known well.
Right.
And if we enter the race, I would hope to have the opportunity, as I did in my autobiography, to let people know our hearts. I'm just a small town guy from southern Indiana that got to live the dream of serving my country in the Congress, as governor, as vice president. My grandfather immigrated to this country. My dad was a combat veteran. I would hope people that have a chance to come to know us for who they are and then make their own decision.
Did it feel good being in the Oval Office up here?
It felt familiar.
Yeah. Mike Pence, the author of So Help Me God, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Great, Alex.
Thank you
Good to
very
see you.
much.
Well,